All right, gonna start this thing up now because I don't know how long I've got to where I have the house all to myself. So, hello, welcome back to Unqualified Analysis. I am your host, Caleb Verzak. You can follow me on all the socials at, you guessed it, Caleb Verzak. And by all the socials, I mean Twitter. And it's going to be down in the description, so you don't even really have to put forth any sort of effort whatsoever. You just go click on that link, and then you know what, you're all good to go. That's all you really need. Outside of that, subscribe on wherever you're listening, whether that be through Apple, whether that be through Spotify, whether that be through Amazon Music for some reason or other, or especially if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead with that. Had a lot of momentum on the YouTube channel here recently, so let's keep that on going, get some subscriber growth going over there. Love to see it. Today, even less structured episode than we had last time. It is straight up all from my phone. I actually started doing work at my new job. Who would have thunk it? Doing work at a job, but I digress there. As such, I've really not had a whole lot of time where I could go and outline. Well, that's not true. There were 2 off days I could have outlined, but I was just plastered to a couch, doing whatever, just trying to ease down, wind down from the day of work that was before. And you know what? Long story short, let me just stop beating around the bush. I didn't really feel like outlining because you know what? I've gotten good enough at talking about these things to where I don't need to necessarily outline. I'm just going to put down headlines, go down the list, and outside of that, talk about the current sports that he's talking about. So with that, on that note, let's just get straight into it, shall we? We are starting off with the NBA Finals update between the Miami Heat and the Denver Nuggets. And the Nuggets started out 1-0. I hate myself for doing that, and I hate myself even more for knowing where that's from. You're going to have to wait just a second here, Riley, because I am doing a recording at this point. You know what? Dang it. I'm going to open it up because she's just too cute. All right? What's going on? What's going on, dog? Want to come hang out? I'm going to leave here in a second because I'm too loud, but, whatever. Stick around. Stick around. Have a good time. Do your thing. You were a dog. All right. Back to it. We're talking about the Denver Nuggets absolutely killed them in Game 1, them being the Heat. Coming off that Game 7 just a couple days prior, flying straight from Boston to Miami. Obviously, the Heat were absolutely gassed. I mean, Max Strus went 0 from the field with 10 shots under his belt. Jimmy Butler wasn't really efficient. Only guy that had a really good game was Bam Adebayo, or as Kendrick Perkins likes to call him, Bam Adebayo. That was the only one that really had a good game in Game 1. They got absolutely killed. Game 2, they changed up the defensive strategy a little bit, came out, basically just said, Jokic, go ahead and score as much as you would like. It is a smorgasbord of points just for you in this Game 2, and he did that. I mean, I think he had 13 points in the first half, which, solid little scoring half. Went absolutely berserk in the third quarter, though. Ended up with 41 for the game. If you're doing the math at home, that's 28 in the second half alone. But the main thing, and the reason that the Miami Heat ended up winning, is because no one else outside of Nikola Jokic had a really good game in Game 2. I mean, outside of that, I think Michael Porter Jr. had 8 shots in Game 2, only played like 26 minutes. Bruce Brown, I think, played more minutes and took more shots. Simply cannot happen. But that was the difference. I mean, really, I think the second leading scorer on the team outside of Nikola Jokic was either Bruce Brown or it was Aaron Gordon. Almost said Eric Gordon. Different guy, different type of shot, but I digress on that front. Either way, Aaron Gordon was the second leading scorer for the Nuggets in Game 2, and he had 12 points. So that tells you just about all you need to know about the defensive strategy for the Heat. Eric Spoelstra drew one up there. Absolutely drew up a masterpiece. Just basically said, Jokic, we're going to guard you one-on-one, and we know you're going to absolutely cook us by, shooting, being efficient, being one of the most efficient offensive players we've seen in the modern era of basketball. Outside of that, though, we're going to negate possibly the greatest strength of his game, which is his passing. Just going to absolutely glue themselves to the surrounding cast. And what do you know? After starting 13-0, I believe, in this postseason, that might be completely wrong. That sounds completely wrong in my head. I don't know how many games it was. They had not lost a game at home up until this point. Did the almost said Miami Heat? They did not lose a game at home to this point. Did the Nuggets? After that, they've now lost one to the Miami Heat. This series is even up, and now we have got an interesting one going back to Miami. Nuggets got to steal one back, plain and simple as that. There goes the dog. Like I said, I'm loud. She doesn't necessarily like it too much. I'm going to close up that door right quick just to make sure if anyone does come home, it's not as loud as it could be. Just being considerate to the others around me. Hopefully, as I'm just walking away and talking at the same time, hopefully I can get this thing done before they even come back. But we are heading back to Miami for Game 3. I think the Game 3 is on Thursday, I want to say. Wednesday, Thursday. I think it's Wednesday, actually, because I remember I have work on that day. I'm going to be up early as all hell. I mean, I am going to be waking up the birds, I tell you. So maybe I won't be able to stay up for it. I'm going to try my damnedest, though. Last night, I couldn't even watch the game because I was still at work. Closing shifts are fun, but I digress. Either way, we got a series on our hands, folks. Nuggets got to come back with their own adjustment here. It's going to be interesting to see what they do, how they kind of work to get teammates around Nikola Jokic open, because bottom line is Jokic can't do it by himself. I mean, that's kind of the way it was last couple postseasons where the Denver Nuggets had a bunch of injuries. Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray are both injured at various times. I think at the same time when it got to the playoffs the last couple of years here. And, it showed in the results in the postseason. I think they won one round last year before it was, Nikola Jokic is insane. He's incredible. He's the best player in basketball. But you get into the second round, you need a supporting cast around you. Otherwise, you're not going to get too far. I would say unless you're LeBron James, but even LeBron James couldn't win any titles without the big three in Miami, or Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love with the Cavaliers. So you need the horses around you to get this thing going. They've got to be better in this next game. I mean, flat out. I mean, that's a pretty obvious statement there, to say the least. But Jamal Murray has to be Jamal Murray again. Michael Porter Jr. has to be Michael Porter Jr. again. Really, Aaron Gordon, just keep doing what you did in Game 2, quite honestly. Aaron Gordon was actually pretty dang good. I mean, pretty efficient. Did the dirty work you needed him to do. Just Michael Porter Jr., you cannot go 2 for 8. You can't just take 8 shots either. I mean, I know you're not making a whole lot of shots, but they need Michael Porter Jr. to consistently take their shots from the outside to continue to be a threat. And really needs to be a credible threat too, but just got to keep shooting. They cannot afford to go quiet in the way that they did in the second game. They are still the better team, and I think they will end up stealing a game on the road. Who's to say if it's going to be in game 3 or 4? Maybe it could be in game 6 if they go back to Miami for a game 6. Feels like it's going to be that sort of series here. Feels like it could go all the distance to game 7, which would be just a dandy and a delight. Hopefully it works out in the favor of the Nuggets. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is the year the Nuggets have to win a title. It's the most wide open opportunity that they've had. It's a full complement of their core, and a core that has generally not stayed healthy for a long period of time. Obviously, Jamal Murray, that is, had that one major knee injury, the ACL, that had him out for a long time. Michael Porter Jr., though, has a laundry list of things that have happened to him, mostly the back. He's had so many back surgeries as a young guy, you just don't know how long he's going to be able to hold up, or if he can hold up like this again all the way through a stretch run in the playoffs. So they got to get this done in this run right now. And it starts with getting those guys open. Michael Malone's got to get into his bag as well. I mean, Eric Spoelstra, for my money, probably the best coach in the entire league at this point. I would say it's not close. There are obviously some guys that are close, but Michael Malone is no slouch in his own right. And he's been there for a long, long time. This is what you get paid the big bucks to do. Find a way to get those guys open around Jokic. Find a way to game plan, move Jokic around a little bit, maybe manipulate the defense a little bit to get some guys open. That's basically what it is. I'm not smart enough at basketball or sports in general to suggest ways to do that, but Michael Malone is in this position for a reason. Him and Jokic, as kind of a brain trust together, have got to come together and make this thing happen if they want to go on and win this title, because the Miami Heat, I'll tell you what, they go like 8 to 10 deep. It's absolutely crazy. Both of these teams go deeper on the bench than just about any playoff team that I can remember in recent memory. I mean, they just legitimately with the Nuggets, they go 8 deep when just about no one else does. The Heat do the exact same, and it's part of the reason why they're so good, because they're so dangerous at all levels, from the bench all the way up to the starters, in like a very similar sort of versatile mode of things. Kevin Love, actually, this is a brilliant move by by Eric Spoelstra. Kevin Love came out and started after being a DNP in game 1. So a little bit of a trickeration there. I assume it's going to be changed up the next time around because you don't want to get a beat on it. You don't want Michael Malone and Nikola Jokic to get a beat on it. Specifically, Nikola Jokic being out there, probably the smartest player in all of basketball at this point. Just a supercomputer in that guy's brain. They got to figure something out. The Miami Heat, it feels like not necessarily the inside track, but they needed to win one on the road if they were going to win this series, just by the laws of math generally. So interesting to see what happens from here. It's a 1-1 series. We are tied up, and this is looking like it's going to be a dandy of a NBA Finals. Looking forward to seeing how this thing progresses, starting off on Wednesday when Game 3 tips off. With that, that is a quick NBA update for you. Let's get on to some headlines, really from around the sports world. We're sticking with football here for the most part, though. And as I say that, on the very top of the headlines here, we've got an NBA headline. So why not just stick with the NBA here for just a minute? Bob Meyers, officially, this was kind of, speculated about going into the offseason. I think every insider in the NBA probably knew this was going to happen, just couldn't outright say that it was, in fact, going to happen. Bob Meyers, the GM of the Warriors, the guy that has built the team to where it is now, officially parted ways with the Warriors this past week. He is a free agent now and probably the hottest GM free agent in recent memory. I can't think of a guy with that type of pedigree that has been on the street with, I'm not sure how many suitors there are. I haven't really, I tried to look at what the open NBA GM jobs are. I keep looking over to make sure that no one's coming in the door. It doesn't matter. Either way, I'm going to be recording this anyways. I digress. But Bob Meyers, 4 championship winning GM, obviously all the pedigree that comes with that, hired Steve Kerr, really built this team up around Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. I think he might have drafted Draymond Green. Actually, he's been there for a minute. He's the architect of this thing. There are also rumblings that Steve Kerr may decide to hit the road as well if the Warriors fully hit the reset button. I don't think he's hitting the road this offseason, but maybe in the future if they go full tank job. Also, a lot of rumblings in this little headline here, but why not add a little more nugget in there? The people that know basketball are saying that Joe Lacob, the owner of the Warriors, is considering installing his own son as the GM. And, outside of the Cowboys, I would defy you to name one single time that has worked out to the success of the team in roster building fashion. I'm not even just talking as far as the coaching aspect is concerned. That's a whole other bag of worms. The reason why the Dallas Cowboys have not been Super Bowl contenders in any real sense of the word since Jerry Jones, well, not since Jerry Jones took over, but you know where I'm getting at here if you know the game of football here. It's the coaching that has kept the Cowboys back for the longest time. And why have they not hired the right coaches? Because Jerry Jones cares more about how he has conversations with the guy over a glass of Johnny Walker than he does about the guy's football acumen and how he relates to the players in general. It's the reason the smiling clapper Jason Garrett stayed there for a long time, and it is the reason that Mike McCarthy got the job here in the first place. Hell, it's the reason why they hired Wade Phillips for a cup of coffee and why they fired him so quickly, because those Johnny Walkers just weren't as sweet anymore when they were growing 4-12. But outside of that one example where that's the best case scenario right now for a nepotism hire, if you will, where a son of an owner takes over as the GM, you can get all that roster building in the world, and there's questions as far as the head coaching hires are concerned. If that happens, and if Joe Lacob installs his son as the GM of his basketball team, would not be shocked at all if Steve Kerr just threw up the deuces, probably took a break for a while, went back to TV or something, then just came back. I was going to say weasel, but that's not really the correct way to describe it. Wouldn't you want out of that situation if it turned into an abject shit show like that? That's what I'm trying to say. I think if that ends up happening and they go full tank mode, they just absolutely lean into it, which I doubt Steph Curry's going to want to do that too. There's a whole lot of dominoes that could fall. I mean, you could see Steve Kerr gone. You could see Steph Curry gone. This thing could really, we are really witnessing the unraveling, really the end of the dynasty as we know it for the Warriors. They got some bad contracts on the books that they can't really move. They got an aging core there. Specifically, Klay Thompson is a shell of his former self. One of the all-time great shooters, just simply from the Achilles to the ACL in back-to-back years, missing over 2 years of basketball at a certain point. It's to be expected. He's a diminished version of himself. That's just how it is. They were lucky to get that championship last year, pulled it right out of their keisters. But the thing is, Steph Curry is still at the height of his powers. I think he probably wants to contend. I don't know what the front office, specifically Joe Lacob and maybe his son, if his son takes over, what they're thinking about building this team as, and if they're thinking about tanking or if they're thinking about being a contender. Obviously, being the way the NBA is, Steph Curry is going to play largely in that decision-making process. Firsthand, I would imagine. He's going to have a big say in what happens there. But that is all to say that we are turning the page. The tides are changing here in Warriors land in the Bay. Bob Meyers, though, sticking specifically with Bob Meyers, not going into that rabbit hole hypotheticals, which I already just did, so I can't really say not going into that. But Bob Meyers, I'm interested to see where he ends up because I cannot imagine he will be out of a job for very long. Maybe he takes this offseason off to kind of, take a break, be like, won 4 championships, maybe just coast for an offseason. There will be jobs available the next time around. And he's got enough of a pedigree championship-wise where I think if he doesn't like any of the openings that are available right now, he can wait another year, see what else comes open, and then take whatever is there, whatever he wants to. He's got that ability to just choose. I don't think Bob Meyers is a lot like the Bill Cowher effect, where if you remember back when I was a kid, Bill Cowher had retired, I don't know, like 5-10 years ago, and still every head coach hiring cycle, there would be a question, is Bill Cowher going to take this terrible job with the Cleveland Browns? Is Bill Cowher going to go over to the Carolina Panthers? Is Bill Cowher yada, yada, yada? It's going to be that same sort of way with Bob Meyers. I think he's going to stay in that consciousness for the GM hiring for quite some time, even if he doesn't take a position here in the immediate future. And he's young enough to where I think he is going to step into another job at some point. It's just a matter of where. And again, if I were a better podcast host, I would have looked up what openings are available right this second, because I don't know that there's really a whole lot of GM openings right now. I'm not really sure there are any. GMs move at a surprisingly slow pace in the NBA in ways that I would not have imagined. But again, I digress. I think Bob Meyers, that's one to watch because he did build a championship contender. I think he could do it again, and whoever picks this guy up is going to get an absolute, maybe star isn't the right term, but a guy that can build a franchise up from the ground up. I can't remember if he was the one that drafted Steph Curry and Klay Thompson or not, but did build a championship contender around that core, did draft Draymond Green for what it's worth, drafted a bunch of guys in the second round or late first round that ended up being very good contributors on the team there when it was all said and done. Maybe didn't draft any stars, but it's hard to draft stars in the late first round, second round sort of thing. So, it's kind of a wait and see sort of thing. I think he's going to end up in a place where he can make a difference, and interested to see where that ends up being. I've talked in circles enough, though. Let's move on to, we got some football up next. We are talking about Aaron Rodgers. Showed up again. Matt Schneidman had an article, I believe it was released middle of last week, something like that, talking directly to Aaron Rodgers, interviewed Aaron Rodgers about the split between him and the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, Rodgers was out there shaping the narrative as he's wont to do. Brian Gutekunst tried to shape the narrative in his own way, so it only seems right. But we all know Aaron Rodgers. He is genuine to a certain point, but also he feels the way he feels, and he likes to, make other people feel that same way. I'll put it that way for you. What he did say is that him and Brian Gutekunst never really got along. I think he one point in the article, in the interview, he said, I think he admitted that he went into the upper management in one of those talks that eventually led to an extension earlier on, the extension before he ended up getting, I'm not even sure what I was trying to say there, but that extension that kept him around for the last couple of years, that was in those conversations like, hey, we need to change the culture around here. It can't be like it was before. And apparently, according to Aaron Rodgers, it was mostly the same except for the PR executive whose name escapes me, seemed to be more frontward facing and whatever. I don't know. I think he's asking a lot to ask the Green Bay Packers to change what they've done for years and years and years and decades. Hell, it seems like it was a little bit too late to ask them to change the culture when they literally did the exact same thing they did to the previous Hall of Fame quarterback that they had in the building, like almost to a T. And I was thinking about this earlier today, listening to Pardon My Take. They had Rich Eisen on there. He's a Jets fan, talking about this situation with Aaron Rodgers. And really, it is like a 90% match of like what this was compared to the Brett Favre situation. Obviously, there's a few differences here and there. Like Brett Favre having retired and then coming out of retirement, doing a little okey doke there as well. A few other things. But basically, you think about it, a couple years before Aaron Rodgers left, they draft a quarterback in the first round. Obviously, a little bit different. They traded back up in the first round, talking about those differences there. They traded back up into the first round to go get Jordan Love. So a little bit different there, but the results were the exact same. The very next year, Aaron Rodgers wins an MVP. Then the year after that, Aaron Rodgers wins another MVP. And then he has one down year and contemplates retirement, and the front office says, you know what, we're done. We're out of here. Get him down the road. We need to see what we have in Jordan Love. They just did the carbon copy of the playbook from the Brett Favre era, and you expect those people, after it worked once for them before, especially if it's going to work again now, if Jordan Love does end up being a very good NFL quarterback, they ain't never changing. They're absolutely never changing. I think it was maybe a little hopelessly optimistic to think that they would go in there and just all of a sudden be this straightforward, tell you everything, open face to the public sort of organization. That's just not what the Green Bay Packers are. They do things a little bit old school, and they're allowed to do things a little bit old school because they don't have an owner that's kind of spurring at their heels to make change happen. This is a situation where if there's an owner there, maybe Aaron Rodgers circumvents the GM situation, goes all the way up to the owner, makes some differences there, but they got a chairman of the board. The chairman of the board answers to the shareholders, and who are the shareholders? A bunch of people that don't really, they care, but they don't actually have a whole lot of power when it's all said and done. They're fans by and large too, so most of them probably on the organization's side anyways, it feels like. It feels like, yes, Aaron Rodgers was there for a long time, but over the past couple of years where Aaron Rodgers has really, especially coming out on the Pat McAfee show, showing his personality a little bit more, being a little bit more outward with some of his views. Well, some of the views I think a lot of the fan base would actually rally behind to a certain extent. We can leave that discussion for another day, but just being kind of a weird dude, a little bit flaky in certain instances, kind of drops off the grid during the offseason. Great leader when he's there, but, kind of an interesting sort of personality off the field. I think people just got annoyed with them and were much more apt to side with the front office than side with Aaron Rodgers in this situation. Mostly because, let's just face it here, the people of Wisconsin are not like Aaron Rodgers. And that's no shade to either Aaron Rodgers or the people of Wisconsin. Aaron Rodgers is just a hippie from Northern California. The people of Wisconsin are hardworking, beer-drinking people that just want to watch the Packers win a Super Bowl year after year and then watch some good football outside of that. Really, all else, mostly just drinking beer and having a good time. I assume Aaron Rodgers is about that as well, but it's just a different sort of culture walking into, I don't want to say middle of nowhere, but a small town in Wisconsin compared to what Aaron Rodgers was dealing with in California, what he's going to be walking into in New York. I think it's, Aaron Rodgers is kind of a big city vibe. And, I think he probably blends in a little bit better with the big city crowd, the highfalutin, big money sort of people, rather than the hardworking people of Wisconsin. And again, it sounds like I'm shading him. I am not. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Different strokes for different folks. People are inherently different in ways based on their upbringing, all sorts of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, maybe the fans were a little bit okay with him leaving at this point, especially after last year where he didn't have the greatest year in the world, mostly due to injuries. He had a thumb injury that kept him from really releasing the ball like we've seen him release the ball for years and years on end. But at the same time, it felt like now was the time to make this thing happen. I've made no bones about it. I thought going into the offseason that they should, I don't know about get rid of Aaron Rodgers. Well, basically I flat out, if you would like to go back in the tapes right going into the offseason, I think I said, put a list of teams in front of Aaron Rodgers or just sit down with Aaron Rodgers and be like, hey, where do you want to go, essentially? Like, pick a place, we'll make it happen. They didn't actually do that. They went classic Packers route and just kind of went behind his back while he was in a darkness retreat and just said, hey, we're going to go over to the Jets, per se, and we're just going to, negotiate some things. And then Aaron Rodgers came out, found out they were negotiating, and said, all right, I guess I'm not retiring. I guess I'm going to the Jets. If you believe what Aaron Rodgers said, which, who's to say? I think he's mostly honest, but you know what? I think so is Jeffrey Dahmer, and there were some very big things he was lying about. And I'm not comparing Jeffrey Dahmer to Aaron Rodgers per se, but that is all to say you can make a lot of things sound good and maybe not necessarily be totally honest with some of the other things you're talking about there. But I have compared a star quarterback to a serial killer, which means it is probably about time to move on to the very next headline. Also, by the way, a serial killer in Wisconsin. How about that? Sweet, sweet serendipity. I don't know about sweet, but yeah, I need to get off this before I really get myself into some hot water. All right, on to the next one here. We are going over to college football now. Eli Drinkwitz put his foot in his mouth, just chomped down on that thing, absolutely swallowed it, and just kept on pushing until he got to the ankle, to the knee, to the shin, all that sort of stuff. Eli Drinkwitz, if you don't know, the head coach of the Missouri Tigers, one of the worst programs in all of the SEC, really only had one good year last year since Blaine Gabbert left, I believe. And he's coming out here saying, I believe maybe not a direct quote, but essentially what the essence of the quote was some of these guys in NIL, some of these young football players in college are making more money than my brother who's a pediatrician. He saves lives. And you know what? I feel sorry for his brother for taking all of those strays, because I would assume many strays were thrown at his brother in that situation. His brother didn't ask for that, so I'm not going to criticize Eli Drinkwitz's brother. And hey, yeah, in a perfect society where, you know what, the people that contribute the most, how do I put this? Worthwhile skills according to, keeping people alive, saving lives, if you will, as Eli Drinkwitz said there. If we were in a perfect society that, catered to those sorts of things, yeah, the doctors, the pediatricians, they would be making so much more money than these athletes. But this is capitalism, my friend. This is just raw, down to brass taxes capitalism here. And the people in capitalism that drive the most profits are going to, in turn, get the most money. That's just how this thing works. So with that in mind, these kids that are stars, which, by the way, let me parse this out as well. There are not a whole lot of kids coming out of high school that are getting paid more than Eli Drinkwitz's brother, who is a pediatrician. I looked up the average pediatrician salary. It's still in the six figures. Low six figures, mind you, but like 150,000, 200,000, something like that. A solid living wage. Most kids coming out of high school are not even sniffing that. I think I want to say this is kind of older statistics, so pee-pee whack me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the highest average NIL by roster, like on a per person basis, on a per player, was below 40,000, I want to say. Maybe 40, 50,000. If you're talking the average player getting NIL deals, it's not even approaching what a pediatrician would make. And the guys that are getting that big money coming out of high school are big time 5-star prospects who are really only getting that money, not from the big time programs, but from places like Colorado who need to make a big splash in recruiting. You see them paying out the ass for some of these guys in NIL, I believe. Travis Hunter they paid for. There's a kid that they got, another cornerback whose name escapes me, was going to go to Alabama, then ended up flipping over to Colorado because of that NIL money. Again, all speculation here, but that's kind of very strong speculation as to what happened. And outside of that, really, outside of the top maybe 10 sort of recruits, no one's making that money. And a lot of times, if they're going to a Georgia, if they're going to a Bama, they're not getting that type of money. It would shock you to know that the biggest NIL spenders as far as the upper echelon of it all are not the Georgias, they're not the Alabamas, they're not the Ohio States, because those coaches, the Ryan Day, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, they can walk in and be like, okay, we could offer you all of that money, but we also know there's a value to this brand. There's a value to this system of development that we have in place. So we're not going to pay you that money. We're going to pay you this amount of money that is, it's fairly simple, which, by the way, it's worth noting here, it's not technically the schools that are paying that money, which I put that in the biggest air quotes of all time, because it's not technically the schools, it's just the collectives that are controlled by who exactly? Who controls where the collective money goes? Interesting sort of proposition there that I'll let you all chew on at home, but I digress. The main point of this is places that are like at the upper echelon that you might be criticizing as, pulling in all these recruits with NIL. NIL's making it absolutely unfair. They can just bid as much as they want and get these kids. It's not working out that way. It's working out more that these kids see the value in going to a big-time program where they can develop into NFL type of prospects. Because, by the way, and I've said by the way a million times, it might be the new phrase I have to eliminate from my lexicon here, but with that said, if you're thinking about in the grand scheme of things, if a 5-star is coming in there, is it more prudent to work towards an NIL deal, or is it more prudent to look ahead in the future and be like, hey, if I develop my skills, if I continue to improve athletically, if I can show my work ethic in this big-time program, on this big-time stage, is it more advantageous to worry about the NIL money, or is it more advantageous to worry about the next level money, the NFL money? Because if you're a first-round pick, basically any contract the first-round pick signs is going to blow the NIL numbers out of the water, especially as we kind of rubber banded upwards in the initial stages of this NIL. It's going to level out kind of in a lower level here as we get going a little bit more. You're not going to be seeing those big-time NIL deals like we saw from Jaden Rashada initially going to Florida for like $8 million a year. That fell through because the Florida boosters are full of just monopoly money, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. Just wasn't real, wasn't there. Again, more speculation, but very strong speculation. There's a reason he ended up at Arizona State when it was all said and done. But this is the way of the world now, man. This is just kind of how it is. And also Eli Drinkwitz, totally wrong. I mean, sure, some of the kids, and I'm very, very much, some of those kids are making big-time NIL money. But if you truly look at it, the kids that are making the biggest NIL money are transfer portal kids. That's like the guys that have proven themselves, the guys that have come in and shown that, hey, maybe I wasn't necessarily a big-time 5-star prospect, or maybe I was a 4-star, 5-star prospect, but you don't know until you get on the field whether that 4-star or 5-star prospect is going to be a big-time player. Those guys that have shown that they're big-time players are often rewarded in the NIL thing, which is remarkably similar to how it would work at the next level. So again, Eli Drinkwitz, I think he came in on some SEC network show, tried to explain himself. I mean, just kept eating that foot. Didn't really help himself out at all. I'm not even sure what he was trying to say outside of doing some coach speak in circles to try and make people think that he was, I don't know what he was trying to do. Add context. I don't know. He mostly just confused me with that whole thing. But again, this is the way of the world. It is capitalism at its finest. And again, I will close it with the way that I opened it. In a capitalistic system, the people that drive profits, the people that drive ratings, the exciting players, if you will, the productive players are the ones that get those bags. That's just the way this is. And with that, let's move back to the NBA, because I skipped over a headline because I just saw Eli Drinkwitz there and I saw red. Just saw red, so I went for it. The Pistons, they hired Monty Williams. Really solid pickup for that young core. They paid him a bag, too, like 6 years, $72 million. I think it could be up to like 8 years, $100 million or something like that. They absolutely paid out the ass for Monty Williams. Let me, real quick, take a sip of this nondescript red drink that is definitely not Coca-Cola, that is caffeinated. I'm just going to, real quick, just a little bit of a parched throat here, real quick. Fancy OK symbol to hold my drink, and we are back to it. Monty Williams being hired to the Pistons, big deal, quite frankly. Maybe not the biggest deal in the world, but I think he did a very good job with the Suns. Obviously, there are some rumblings about the people situation. We don't have to rehash all of that once again. it really, in the NBA, it's the players that fire you more than anything else. I'll just put it that way. I guess the players in the Suns didn't. I like Monty Williams. He's still a very, very good coach, though. And from what I've heard, he's a good guy. Maybe he's not the Suns' version of a good guy, or favorite version of a good guy, if you will. Not their type of guy. But going over to a young team like the Pistons that you can kind of mold and bring up, not necessarily veteran-laden. You got a really talented core. You got Cade Cunningham, I think Sadiq Bey there. I want to say they picked up James Wiseman in a trade unless he went somewhere else. I have no idea where that guy is at nowadays, but they got another high pick in this draft as well, and they can really build something there. Monty Williams is a guy that can make it happen too. I'm still not entirely sure what tier I would put him in. He's not in the very bottom tier where he's just getting fired every other year. I don't think he's quite as low as the Tom Thibodeau tier. Well, here's the thing. I think he is, again, talk about this before. I think there's 3 tiers of NBA coaches. I think it's the very bottom tier. It's the middle tier where they can get you to a playoff spot, but maybe not get you all the way over the hump. And then there's the very elite tier of like the Steve Kerrs, the Eric Spoelsters, like the very best of the best as far as coaches are concerned. I want to say Monty Williams is somewhere at the top of that middle tier, kind of bumping up to that edge where you say, I don't know, is he good enough to win a championship? Is he not? He's certainly good enough to get you to the playoffs, though, and I think this is a very, very good signing. It's a long-term signing as well, so they can keep him around as long as they want to, pretty much, especially, like I said, with a young budding star like Cade Cunningham. This is a fantastic place for Monty Williams to be. It's a Detroit Pistons team that has been sorry, just abjectly terrible for many years now, and having a guy in there like Monty Williams, a consistent coach who they have not had for quite some time, I think this is going to be a really good shot in the arm of the franchise. I don't know if it translates into a playoff spot next year. I think they're going to be much better next year. It's hard to be much worse. I think they got less than 30 wins this past season, so work's cut out for them. But I do think this is a very good spot for Monty Williams. It's a very good hire by the Detroit Pistons, and it's an absolute bag of money. I think this is just a slam dunk for all sides involved. Maybe Monty Williams didn't want to go there. That's wild speculation at that. I'd want to go there, really, I wouldn't say no matter what, but you throw $12 million a year at me, throw me on the next trip to China, quite frankly. China's a little bit too much. Throw me on the next trip to Turkmenistan here. I will go wherever you want me to for $12 million a year, quite frankly. So I think it's a good hire on all ends here. I think Monty Williams is going to develop that young core, and we'll see what it ends up being when it's all said and done. Sticking with the NBA here, Ja Morant hasn't been handed down a suspension yet by the league office, but it's pretty clear just based on what Adam Silver's comments were before the finals. He said there's been significant findings outside of what we already know publicly, and they're going to probably, his words basically were, they don't want to, or he doesn't want to take away the shine of the NBA Finals by announcing the suspension. It seems like they have made a decision, though. They're just going to be waiting till after the finals are over to publicize that decision and let everyone know what it is. And I can understand that to a certain extent. Don't want to make a big story out of it now to take away from the on-court sort of things, because it's going to be a massive suspension. I don't know what it's going to be. It is going to be a massive suspension, though. It seems like the league office has decided on that, and I'm interested to hear through leaks and whatnot. All these NBA journalists need to go out there and do their due diligence to find out exactly what other significant findings the NBA had that they are just not telling us right now. I think that'll trickle out as these things come to light and as the suspension is handed down. But that's the news for right now. Really no news, but it's looming on the horizon. After the NBA Finals is done, we're going to get some sort of news here on Ja Morant and that suspension, what it's going to look like, what other stipulations come with it. And then from there, what do the Memphis Grizzlies do with Ja Morant? He's too talented. You kind of got to keep him around at this point, but if he keeps just absolutely shitting the bed when it comes to just staying on the straight and narrow, who's to say what happens? This is an ongoing, developing situation. You hope for the best for the kid because obviously he's going through some stuff right now, but not looking good, and a suspension is coming. I will tell you that right now. Let's rubber band back to the college game, shall we? Because the SEC, I believe, I believe they officially decided that when Oklahoma and Texas come over to the SEC, they're going to have 8 conference games, getting rid of the division system, which as one of the lowest teams in the SEC West year after year and still being ranked, thank you so much. Thank you so much for getting rid of the division system, because I am absolutely tired of having a good team. And then, oh, by the way, you have to go to Death Valley. You got to go to Kyle Field. You got to play Alabama every year. You got to play Arkansas. And, well, we're going to play Ole Miss every year anyways, but you just keep playing big-time team after big-time team. Also Auburn thrown in there as well, but we have been shown in the past to be the fraud detector with Auburn. When they have these hot starts to the season, people are thinking, hey, maybe Auburn's good this year. It's up to Mississippi State sometimes to go in there and be like, hey, guys, they're not that good. Let's show you how that ends up being. I love the Auburn. It's not even necessarily a rivalry. I will miss the Auburn matchups, but even so, with this new system, I think it's like an every 2 years sort of thing. So take a 2-year break. See Auburn eventually. Anyways, it's going to be good on a round-robin basis, where everyone plays. Everyone, the East and West, aren't totally misbalanced. No more divisions. We're just playing straight up. May the best man win when it's all said and done. May the best 2 teams come out and be in the SEC championship is the main thing. That's not the crux of the issue, though. I think many people were thinking they would bump it up to 9 SEC games and just deal with the consequences from there. There was a lot of belly aching from the Twitter community about oh man, there's only 2 SEC teams over the last 10 years, or maybe I don't remember what it was. Only 2 SEC teams that are scheduled to play 10 FBS opponents, 10 Power 5 opponents, if you will, all these sorts of things. People talking about the SEC schedule and cupcakes in late in the season to get tune-up games before rivalry week, just basically saying, oh, the SEC is a bunch of frauds. And guys, I don't know if you checked the strength of schedule, but a couple weeks ago, I believe it was ESPN came out with a strength of schedule metric where they ranked the top 25 strength of schedule. And do you want to know how many teams just in the SEC West were in that top 25 graphic? I'll give you a second to think about it there. If you guessed all of them, that's correct. Yeah, every single one of the SEC West teams are in the top 25 in strength of schedule. I believe Mississippi State rounded out the top 25 at 25 in there. And we play no 2 ways about it, absolute cupcakes out of conference. We play some terrible teams to start the season, and then we play like an Alcorn or something right before we have to go play Ole Miss. Everyone in the SEC does it. It's not my favorite thing to watch in the world, but when you're playing a schedule that consists of just powerhouse after powerhouse after powerhouse, I don't think you necessarily need that extra conference game just to appease the masses. I think you are tested very adequately in the SEC itself, specifically in this division system in the SEC West. I don't have to go through all the absolute killers that are in the SEC West right now again for you, because it makes me depressed just thinking about it, but we're coming to an end of that, so gotta set that to the side for right now. But they don't need an extra SEC game because the conference is just already that loaded. And with the new sort of round-robin system, it's going to be an even more well-distributed sort of schedule to where not all 7 SEC West teams are going to be in the top 25 of schedule strength in a given year. But it's going to be a lot more other teams, maybe now Eastern Division teams, that are going to be in that graphic as well. I assume Georgia is not going to be feasting off of cupcakes. If you want to single somebody out, which no one really does single out Georgia because they're, the back-to-back national champions. But if there was a team you wanted to single out, look no further than Georgia. They play a couple teams early on in the season, and then it's Cupcake City from then until the end of the season, pretty much until basically the SEC championship. I do believe they have to play Tennessee at some point before that, but that's like in November they play Tennessee. Between late September, and early November, they do not play one team that is even remotely on their level. Meanwhile, Alabama over in the SEC West is playing LSU. They're playing Texas A&M, who's going to be better this year. They're playing Auburn, which is always a tough game, no matter what, just because of the rivalry dynamics of that. It's just a different world over in the SEC West, but that's not the point here. The main point here is that you don't need that extra SEC game. It's simply, maybe other conferences do, maybe conferences that aren't quite as strong, like the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12. Maybe you need that extra conference game to bolster your strength of schedule. Get that extra Power 5 conference game in there to make you feel better. In the SEC, we beat the hell out of each other enough. We don't need that extra game in there. We have got our hands full as is, and I use the term "we" very, very liberally, because you know what? I'm hand up. I'm realistic about this. Mississippi State isn't on the level of an Alabama or an LSU or a Georgia. Really not, especially not capital-wise, not on the level of Auburn either. So, like, I get it. We are in the SEC, though. We're still better than most teams in the ACC. I think I'm not even going to get down that road, but I have maintained that really, since I started being a fan of Mississippi State back in the day when I was going there, I have maintained that if we were in the ACC, we'd win 10 games every fucking year. I will die on that hill. We'd win 10 games damn near every year if we were in the ACC. The only real guaranteed loss up until Florida State came onto the scene here recently was Clemson. Outside of that, we could run the ACC if we needed to, and we are like a bottom 4 team overall in the SEC. That's how loaded the SEC is. They don't need the extra conference game, and I will leave it at that. Moving down the list here, and we have got a run of NFL headlines here. But before we get to that, let's just knock out the last NBA headline, shall we? So I just stop rubber banding you back and forth. Kyrie LeBron maybe getting into a reunion, but not in LA. Kyrie has reached out to LeBron James reportedly to probe interest about a possible reunion in Dallas, down there in Texas. And I don't know if this will actually come to fruition. I think there's only so much ball to go around. And does LeBron James really want to be the third scorer on a team? Because he's going to have to be the third scorer if he goes into a team with Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving at this point, especially at LeBron's advanced age. Not necessarily an ideal situation if he wants to still be one of the top threats on a team. And also, I'm not sure if that's a group of players that works together. I'm not even really thinking about this from a basketball perspective. I'm just thinking right now, Kyrie Irving went down to Texas, and at first he was like, man, I'm glad to be out of Brooklyn, man. There was a shit show. They didn't understand my anti-Semitic views, and, you know, they aren't my views, I guess. How can I be anti-Semitic if I am Semitic in my own right? Just go look up the Black Israelites if you want to know what the hell I'm talking about there, or what the hell Kyrie is talking about on a given day. You still probably won't necessarily understand, but you'll understand some of the circular logic, if you will, that comes out of Kyrie Irving's mouth at some point when it comes to the whole anti-Semitic documentary thing. Just go look up the Black Israelites. It is a fun trip down, crazy town lane. I'll tell you what, there. Neither here nor there. Nets didn't understand. He comes down to Dallas like, all right, got a fresh new start. And you know what? It wasn't the basketball that got him where he wanted to be. No, because they didn't even make the playoffs. They decided to lose to avoid even getting into the play-in game. So, you know what? They're losers over there. That is plain to see. But what Kyrie Irving saw more than anything else is he got those paychecks, he got those direct deposits at the end of the month and was like, damn, I am making so much more money than I was in Brooklyn. Let me go look at the breakdown of that. Wait, there's no state income tax here? My goodness. Sorry, just getting a text from the parental unit there. Just getting right back onto it. My goodness, though, Kyrie Irving just looked at it, was like, you know what? I'm not getting state income tax here. He texts up LeBron, hey, LeBron, did you know there's no state income tax in Texas? Could you imagine making what you're making now with no state income tax on home games? My goodness, you could be making a killing if you came down here. That's really more of like what I'm thinking this whole situation was more than anything, which is probably why Kyrie Irving's like, hey, I want to play with you again, LeBron, But could we maybe play down in Texas instead? Maybe not play in LA, where I once again have to go to tax hell and play in this beautiful city. But you ever seen Dallas? Ever seen the Dallas-Fort Worth area? It's pretty beautiful in its own right. Something to consider down there. I don't think this is going to happen. I think LeBron James is probably going to stick around with LA. Probably going to try and build a contender there if I had to guess. But this is just, if I had to guess what is happening there, Kyrie Irving went to tax heaven over there in Texas and decided, I'm never leaving this. I'm never going back to paying big time taxes again. Because if you think about it, I guess maybe in Ohio it wasn't the biggest consideration in the world, but he wasn't making the biggest money in the world. He goes to Massachusetts, playing in Boston, getting the big time taxes there. Goes to Brooklyn, playing in New York, big time taxes there. Goes down to Texas, and all of a sudden he is just making buku bucks more than what he was before. I would imagine, just speaking from experience here, going from a northern state to a southern state, feels good. Feels good to not have to pay state income taxes. I will tell you that right now, and I feel for you, Kyrie. Maybe not on some of the other things, but I feel for you on this one. Once you get a taste of that no state income tax life, it is hard to go back, my friend. I understand. Let's get to the final two headlines of the episode here. Final three, actually, and we'll start off with the most football-related one. Dalvin Cook, still on the Vikings roster, even with being June 5th. June 2nd was when he could do the post-June 1 cut. By the laws of post-June 1, yada, yada, yada. Why is he still on the roster? In short, I don't know. It feels like they could cut him at any time. I got two theories for you. One, they found a trading partner and they're trying to figure out what the compensation is going to be. Eventually he moves on that way. That feels less likely to me. I don't think that's going to be what ends up happening. If he was going to get traded, I feel like he would have been traded for by now, unless maybe the Vikings were asking for a certain sort of package. Like he almost got traded reportedly. Burping up a storm here. But before the draft, reportedly, I think this was like from Ari Mirov via whoever he stole that headline from. He's a news aggregator, not a news reporter. We don't have to go over that whole vague system there. But said something along the lines of there was a package in place. They were working very near deal done for Dalvin Cook to go down to the Miami Dolphins before the NFL draft. This was in March when the deal was purportedly being worked out. Fell through, didn't work out. So there has been interest in the past. Maybe Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah is thinking, all right, we are at the deadline now, trying to just get him out for salvage value. Maybe just try to get him off the books without, totally losing him for nothing, I suppose. So maybe they drop their value expectations on him. Maybe instead of a 4th round pick, they're looking for a 6th or a 7th round pick, and maybe there's a suitor that comes in from that. That's the first possibility there. The second possibility, and the one that I find a little bit more likely because it's something that I've heard rumblings of through the Twitter sphere over the last week or so, is that maybe they are in negotiations, Dalvin Cook and the Vikings, to come to terms on maybe some sort of salary cut to keep him with the team and lower his cap hit right now. Because that's the main thing, is they can save about $9 million, just short of $10 million on the cap hit if they cut Dalvin Cook post-June 1, which they can do anytime now. It's not even a post-June 1 designation. They just cut him, and, would you look at the calendar? It's June 5th. It's after June 1st now. So it's either, that's a consideration. It's all salary-based, and also kind of due to the fact that not necessarily the biggest fit for Kevin O'Connell's run scheme. Big-time straight-line speed guy, but for that sort of scheme, seems to be more inclined for shiftier guys to step in and have success there. And also, I'm not sure what the running back depth chart looks like after Dalvin Cook. I feel like it makes a lot of sense to keep him around now because, who would you start? You start Alexander Madison. I'm not a big statistics guy for the most part, but you can go back and look at like the rushing yards over expectation. I think that's a good thing to look at when you're talking about the success of running backs. Alexander Madison was one of the worst running backs in the entire league when it came to yards over expectation. He had negative yards over expectation. I'll tell you that right now. So I don't think he'd be the long-term starter. We just drafted a kid out of UAB I forget the kid's name off the top of my head, but drafted him in the 7th round. Shifty guy. Very good highlight reel. I mean, just a very entertaining player to watch on the film. I think if Dalvin Cook doesn't end up being with the team, that's the guy that's going to take the starting role eventually, because I've seen enough from Alexander Mattison. He just simply does not have it. Maybe it's this scheme. He wasn't really great in the last scheme either, though. So I'm not very high on Alexander Mattison. Just because he looks like Dalvin Cook does not mean he plays like Dalvin Cook. Very much to the contrary. I think the guy that they just brought in, I want to say it's McBride. Could be totally wrong on that, but I digress on that front. Back to Dalvin Cook, though. I do think, I don't know why it's taken this long. My best guess, though, is that they're working on some sort of pay cut that would still keep him well paid, but not necessarily breaking the bank as far as the cap is concerned. Maybe they convert some stuff over to signing bonus, so they really cut down on the cap hit there as well. I'm interested to see what works out here. I still find it kind of unlikely that he's with the team. I just don't know whether it's going to be a trade for salvage value or if they cut him. Personally, I'd love to see him. I mean, you hate to say you'd love to see someone take a pay cut, but I'd love to see him stay with the Vikings, and I think the only way he stays with the Vikings is if he restructures his contract, if you will, meaning he takes a pay cut in there, if nothing else. So, interested to see how that one works out. I'm not hopeful that he stays with the team. Made no bones about it in the past. I mean, it's a straight financial consideration. You hate to see it, but it is what it is at this point. Just kind of got to wait and see what happens going forward now. I think we'll wrap it up with this one. Bills defensive tackle Ed Oliver signed a 4-year, $68 million deal, $45 million guaranteed. Not a bad little deal there for Ed Oliver. He's not necessarily the upper echelon of upper echelons when it comes to defensive tackles. He's a very, very good defensive tackle, though a little bit undersized. Maybe not quite that Quinn Williams type of level of what he'd be asking for. But based on what he does, very good pass rusher, very quick on the inside, matchup nightmare when it comes to passing downs. This is a good deal for Ed Oliver to come in here and get that out of the way. And you know what? I don't really have a whole lot to say about that. Just a good guy, fits in the scheme very well. A guy that they needed to keep around when it was all said and done, and the Bills get it done. Brandon Beane, one of the best GMs in the entire league. Watch out, they might still be in the sweepstakes for DeAndre Hopkins. One of those teams that was in the mix in the trade market. We'll see if it works out that way in free agency. And didn't have a whole lot to say about that. So let's wrap up with a feel-good story, shall we? Rams defensive coordinator Raheem Morris helped save a kid's life last week. Kid was drowning in a public pool, or I think it was a public pool, something like that. Gets pulled out of the water. Kid's not breathing, no pulse. There's a doctor around, so this is a little bit of the disingenuous side of the way this was framed. It was framed that Raheem Morris saved a kid's life. He helped save a kid's life. There was a doctor on hand, started administering chest compressions. Raheem Morris, to his credit, quick thinking, was like, hey, does someone have an AED, automatic electric defibrillator, I think is what it's called. So is there an AED around? There was an AED around. He goes and gets it while the doctor is doing chest compressions, brings it over to the kid, gives it to the doctor. Doctor applies it, gets the kid's heart jump started again. Kid's totally fine now. I mean, absolute hero shit. Maybe didn't firsthand save the kid's life, but his quick thinking absolutely made a difference there. And hey, shout out to Raheem Morris. This might be the only highlight of his. I mean, cherish this right now, this feeling of being a hero, because he is going to be lambasted by the fan base throughout the course of this year, man. It is not a very good defense he's got at his disposal, and quite frankly, it's not his fault. Raheem Morris, obviously a good dude, helped save a kid's life. Savor that memory, because that is that's just kind of, that's probably the best thing that's going to happen for him in the year of 2023, I'd have to imagine. And with that, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. It's been a good week of headlines here. We ended it off with a feel-good story of a man saving a young boy's life, or at least helping saving a young boy's life. And with that, we are done. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, like, subscribe. I don't have the outro in front of me right now, so I'm just going off the cuff here, man. If you liked it, subscribe, rate 5 stars, share it with a friend. Why not? We're trying to grow this thing a little bit. If you didn't like it, suck my peen. That's all you got to do right there. You just suck it, and you suck it good, and then you move on, and you tell no one about it, all right? Not about the dick sucking, and not about how much you didn't like the podcast. That's me pointing here at you with all 5 of my fingers. That is absolutely what you should do. With that, though, follow me on my Twitter at Caleb Verzak. If you want to go over there, the link is in the description, so you have to spell my fucked up Eastern Bloc name. Did it for you. No need to even worry about it. It is done, sealed, signed, delivered, all of that sort of good stuff. Outside of that, if you want to add something to the show, shoot me a DM on Twitter. That would probably be the best way to get it out across to me. Or go to the email unqualifiedanalysis@gmail.com. Put business or show in the subject line so you can be categorized accordingly. And with that, thanks so much for tuning in to Unqualified Analysis. I've got no clue what I'm talking about. And one thing I learned this week, Canada is closer to Africa than the U.S. is, just based on the eastern reach of Canada. The maps you've been looking at, they're wrong. They're telling you things that are not true. The upper eastern part of Canada reaches so far over into the Atlantic that the farthest point, the closest point to Africa in Canada is closer than any point in the United States. Fun fact there, even though they are farther north. Chew on that one. Either way, this has been a good hour. Talk to y'all next week. See ya.